Happy Weirdness Day!
Hey guys, this is our podcast. It's called On Wednesdays We Talk Weird, where every Wednesday we're going to talk about subjects ranging from the ooky
To the spooky.
We're also going to do a tarot card reading weekly.
By me.
And we're just going to kind of get a flow for the week and how things are, looking to go. So, here we are. Today, I was actually on social media and I noticed that it was John Keel's birthday, which I thought was kind of fitting because the topic that we had picked to talk to you guys about this week was the Mothman. And John Keel, he's kind of the one that made the Mothman famous. I mean, he's kind of the reason, why everybody talks about it so much, because otherwise it was pretty obscure. So, the Mothman is kind of this local urban legend in West Virginia. So in Point Pleasant, they started kind of seeing this weird humanoid type creature in the 1960s. And the sightings happened for about a year. So they started in 66 when this group of kids had an encounter with this creature in this area. What they call it, the TNT area, but it's now like a wildlife preserve. But it used to be where the government produced munitions and stuff like that during World War II. But like kids would go out there and drive around and they would, smoke their pots and, do whatever it is kids do in weird abandoned places. But they were out there one day, they were driving around and they stopped and parked at the power plant area and they had seen this creature kind of walk out of the power plant. It was kind of stumbling around, it was kind of walking weird. So they left, and the Mothman actually chased them down. So after, they had this weird encounter with him, they ended up going to the local police, and the sheriff actually, went back to the area with the kids, and they didn't find it again, but they did, they did have some weird situation. So like the sheriff had like interference on his radio, stuff like that. And then kind of from that point on, the sightings picked up. The whole town went out searching for this Mothman creature. And, it just kind of became like the thing to do. The whole family would get out and, go to the TNT area and just kind of search it and see what they could find. So, yeah. But the Mothman, sightings really picked up then. And then about a year later, they ended up having a really tragic event. The bridge connecting West Virginia to Ohio, the Silver Bridge, collapsed. And then after the bridge collapsed, he really wasn't seen again. So a lot of people think that, maybe he was an omen to try to, like, warn the town about the bridge or, what have you. But
now, was he actually seen by the bridge then? Or was that just coincidence, like he was spotted and then the bridge collapsed, or did somebody see him from that point and then the bridge collapsed like a day later?
No, it was about a year. So when the sighting started, it was November 1966, and the bridge collapsed December 1967.
Okay, so in like that year of 67, was there any sightings then?
No. Well, okay. There might have been some like one-offs here and there.
Just not reported.
Right. The majority of sightings happened, in between that time frame. And it didn't just happen in West Virginia. It happened in Ohio as well. It was actually an Ohio journalist who dubbed the name Mothman. So, it's not strictly a local legend to them. But, some people think that what people were seeing at the time, because the way that they described him, he was like 6 foot. He had like he had wings. He had like a 10-foot wingspan, and he just kind of like he didn't really look like he had a head, but it seems like more like he didn't have a neck rather than not a head. But there was no like discernible. It was just kind of a rounded shape, with these big red eyes. And most people, say that it was like black or brown. Or something like that. But, there's some scientists that have said that it's possible that what people were seeing was a sandhill crane. Now, I don't think that makes any sense because sandhill cranes, I mean, they're white, first of all, so they're pretty easy to see. The body shape is not correct.
Yeah, it's so small.
Right. I mean, they do have like a 10-foot wingspan or whatever, but I just don't, it just...
Yeah, but for him to be 6 foot tall, that would have to be a really big bird.
Right, exactly. So, an owl would make more sense, and some people have said that. Now, granted, we know owls aren't that big, but they do have those big brown eyes that, the Mothman's kind of known for having. So,
Well, and birds, they're a little harder to see. They're often hidden away. It's like when it comes to an owl specifically, you don't always see them. It's not every day you can go outside and see an owl. Now, there are people who have seen owls, but if something doesn't want to be discovered, it's going to avoid that.
well, that's
Just
true.
like recently we had a bird that's been sighted for Lord knows how long, but they were finally able to capture like the first picture of it. Forget the name of the bird, but it just goes to show that we're still discovering things on our planet.
Well,
So
right, and I mean, it's a possibility that maybe the Mothman's just like a big bird that we haven't discovered yet.
Exactly.
I mean, that's a good possibility. I mean, that's something that I always say when it comes to cryptozoology is that the most likely candidates for being real are going to be animals that are either in the sky or in the water, because we're on the ground. We're not typically in the sky, or we're not typically in the water. I mean, there's a lot of hiding places when you expand just beyond ground level. So I mean, that could be as well. It definitely could be something like that. Because the TNT area, is government owned, and because they have, all this land or whatever, and then, like, now to this day, there's still munitions at the TNT area. Like, they haven't cleaned them up. I think there was an explosion, actually, back in 2002, or 2010, actually. And they still haven't cleaned up all of the munitions that are there. So some people think that, the Mothman could be like a mutated species, like something that we already know about, but, has been mutated. I don't think that's likely. I don't personally believe in like radioactive mutations or anything like that. I mean, the science.
Well, especially when it comes to something like, explosives. Like, that's not really something that's going to mutate anything. It's not radioactive.
Right, exactly.
Unless it's nuclear, then I can see. But
right. I mean, it just doesn't seem very likely to me. But, I've never seen the Mothman, so I don't know. Now, at the same time that, that Mothman was happening, that the sightings were happening, there were other weird things, too. And this is kind of where where John Keel comes in. So about 10 days before the first Mothman sighting happened, there is a guy, his name is Woodrow Derenberger. He was driving home from work, and he says that a UFO stopped him in the middle of the road, and a person got out. And when I say a person, like, he describes this as just an ordinary person, just a male, got out of the car, came over to the window, and started speaking to him, but Derenberger says that he talked to him telepathically. And they kind of had a conversation, and, they had about a 15-minute long conversation. The regular guy got back into the spaceship and flew off. So Derenberger went home. He told his wife. He contacted local police. The news came out, the media came out, they had a big press conference and everything. But what I found strange was that agents from Wright Pat Air Force Base came down and spoke with Derenberger about his incident. And what Derenberger says is that, they were really supportive. They were really nice. They believed his story. At least they, made it sound like they did. So that was weird. So it's like, did the government know?
well, I mean, they're definitely in contact with aliens to some degree, even if it's not communicating. They definitely have some superior knowledge that we don't have.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no way that they don't, just because of Area 51.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, I think that is a good possibility. But it's like, did they know because they are aware of this character, which he told him, the quote unquote regular guy told Derenberger his name was Indrid Cold. Did they know about Indrid Cold before, or were they interested about learning about
Right.
Indrid Cold? So it's kind of a weird, a gray area, I guess, because
Yeah, it could have been like, hey, we're trying to figure out like what this actually was, or they're kind of going there to touch base to see like what kind of communication was had. Like, they give you any information? Did they tell you anything that is of importance?
right. Well, in the injured cold situation, like I said, it happened 10 days before the Mothman thing, but it also happened in the same area. I mean, it was all, in that area. So there's some speculation that maybe injured cold and the Mothman are the same. Maybe they're the same person, or maybe they're related somehow.
Is there a timeline that's constructed for that?
Yeah,
Like
well, again, it happened 10 days in between each other.
Okay.
Injured Cold came down, talked to Woodrow Derenberger, and then 10 days later, the Mothman sighting started happening. Okay. So, they do kind of coincide in the same area, and there were also just a lot of UFO sightings in the area in general, more than usual. But in the 1950s, what happened kind of right before all this happened, there was another weird kind of one-off incident. And it was the Flatwoods Monster. So this group of people, it was like a couple kids. It was, I think, the mom. There was another adult there, and then their dog. They all went into the woods, and they found this spaceship in the middle of the woods. And but with the spaceship, they also found this like alien-like creature, and it was huge. It was like 10 foot tall. Kind of looks like a nun. It's kind of, it kind of looks motherly. It's weird, but it also had these giant glowing eyes. And so they all, they left the site. They ended up going back to, back home, and, they reported the incident. Well, they had some people come out to the area where the spaceship was, because obviously they came back out and investigated. There was nothing there. However, what they did find was that the area was extremely radioactive. And then everybody in that group ended up getting really sick. Within a week of this sighting, everybody got extremely sick. So it was just a very strange incident. And again, that was about an hour south of Point Pleasant. So, it's kind of seeming like, these incidences in West Virginia are happening frequently. Frequently enough. And, they're all just so bizarre, and they're all credible. If you go back and look at, different people that have, supposedly seen the Mothman. These are credible people. It's not just, it's not just these random folks just wanting to be a part of something. Even like the famous, with the Scarberry sighting with, the 4 kids or whatever, being chased by the Mothman. They make note of like how, like they've talked later after they came out with the sighting, and they've all mentioned how much, it kind of really sucks for them because nobody believes them. People don't believe that this happened, except for other people that have seen the Mothman, but they've been made fun of, they've been kind of ostracized from their community, they didn't gain anything from it. Woodrow Derenberger, he was just a regular guy, he was actually a very God-fearing man. He went to church frequently. He lost his job, he lost his family. He ended up, kind of giving up his religion. It really changed his life. So, to think that these people are just reporting these sightings for clout, that just doesn't really make any sense, So also in West Virginia is there's a SETI satellite there. And, SETI is, the search for, extraterrestrial intelligence. And they put a SETI satellite out there because West Virginia is really a bunch of nothing. It is in the middle of nowhere. Most everything is in the middle of nowhere. And, they put that satellite out there, and that also happened in the 1960s. So
do you think that has any connection with Roswell as far as like, the technology used for these satellites? Because aren't these satellites used for anything in particular? Like,
they definitely could, and especially with like the fact that like Wright Pat could be involved, or has been involved with any of this, because people that supposedly see the Mothman, they've also been visited by the Men in Black. They've mentioned that, and then of course we've got Woodrow Derenberger, who was visited by an associate of Wright Pat. So with Roswell, that happened back in 1947. And supposedly the pieces from the crash site and the bodies were taken to and are still stored at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio. It's about 2 hours away from Point Pleasant. You know, on that ship, if you think about it and you think about like how we travel on our boats and on our ships, we have radios on them. So if this was a real alien spaceship that crashed, then you would think that they would have some type of radio on it for communication purposes. So if they took that technology and they brought it to right pat, then they definitely could have, tried to like reverse engineer and, get that communication up and running. They could have taken that technology and applied it to a larger satellite, because maybe they have the blueprints for it, but they don't have the correct materials because these are extraterrestrial materials, So then they could have applied that science then to the SETI satellite, but who knows why it's there. I mean, like I said, it makes sense for them to put it there. They're trying to reach out to somebody. But did they put it there and then they called? Maybe they put it there first and called these creatures to us? Because I believe the SETI satellite was set up before all these sightings started happening. And then all of a sudden all these sightings were happening, and, maybe it's because we put out some type of message to get there. But I do think, there's a good possibility, that the government's involved here. It doesn't make any sense. And I do think that all of these incidences are related. I think that they're too similar in such a close area for them kind of not to be. And, that's kind of what, that's kind of what John Keel talked about. He believes that all of these things are related. He's been known to kind of call these beings ultra-terrestrial, which means that they can jump between dimensions. And he thinks that is a good explanation for them, and that's why there are like weird one-off sightings, like in the case of like the Flatwoods Monster.
So what would differentiate it from an extraterrestrial?
Well, an extraterrestrial, because we have different dimensions. We're third dimensional. Okay.
So extraterrestrials are just more intergalactic.
They would be more intergalactic. Okay. They're still third dimensional beings, but they just would live far away. They could have it more advanced technology than we would. Whereas when you have an extraterrestrial, they could be fourth dimensional, fifth dimensional, sixth dimensional. We don't know. Our minds can't perceive those types of dimensions because we are only up to the third dimension. So, that would be the difference there. In the case of these being ultra-dimensional beings, it could be that, like, Mothman maybe came to our dimension, maybe accidentally. Maybe it got stuck and couldn't leave. That's why he was here for a certain amount of time. Then again, if we're talking ultra-dimensional beings, it could be that Mothman was here. In his perception of time, he was only here for, like, 5 minutes. But to our perception of time, it would have been, 13 months? Mm. So, that, and again, that just really depends on, ultra-terrestrials and kind of our understanding or, inability to understand, because we can't perceive that. Another theory that people have talked about is, that Mothman could possibly be basically a marketing scheme for the town of Point Pleasant. So, like, I've been there, and it's just, it is a really poverty-stricken town. It's really poor. Again, they had the power plant there, and the whole town, at that point, the whole town had jobs, but this was during World War II. And when the war ended, they didn't have a need to make these munitions anymore, so when the government pulled out of the area, it left all these people jobless. The Mothman Festival, they have a festival there every year in Point Pleasant. The festival itself has only been going on for about, I think, the last 9 years. I think this year is getting ready to be the 10th year that the festival has happened. And if you look at the numbers and, like, you can talk to the locals, the festival brings in the entire town's revenue for the entire year. Like, they really rely on this. And, they've got the museum there, which is, obviously gimmicky, and it's geared towards the Mothman. But then there's, like, other stuff. Like, there's an antique shop there, and, they just sell basic antiques, furnitures, knickknacks, things like that. But then they'll have, like, in the antique shop, they'll have, like, Mothman action figures and t-shirts. So, it could be that, the town has kind of kept this alive, not because they genuinely believe in it, but because they profit off of it. So, I mean, that's another theory.
But there's probably still people that have had experiences and, felt that this was a real experience or do believe that it was a real experience. But then there's also people that are there to exploit that fact, which just kind of blurs the lines and it makes it really hard to kind of differentiate, like, is this real or is it a hoax?
Well, that's true because, I mean, as of current day, even though the Mothman sightings, they didn't stop altogether after the bridge collapsed, but they did become, they cut down a lot. But after that, right now there are active sightings going on of the Mothman in Chicago. There's Chicago and the Lake Michigan area, and they've been going on since 2016.
Well, and hasn't he always been seen near, like, some form of body of water?
Correct. He's typically, I mean, there's pretty much always a big body of water, which in this case, there is. And, so, I mean, now that it's happening present day, I mean, Chicago doesn't need to profit off the Mothman. Chicago's a big city. They don't really need that kind of exposure. But so now it's happening. I mean, I think, the most recent sighting, and I could be wrong on this, but I believe it was, back in February. It was at the O'Hare Airport in Chicago. So, I mean, there are active sightings going on. I mean, who knows? Going back to, like, the possibility that he's an omen theory, I mean, what does that mean then? Are we just kind of waiting for something to happen? What is he trying to tell us? I mean, that's a possibility. And then there was the guy in Mason, Ohio, which is by Point Pleasant, claims to have taken a picture in 2016 of the Mothman. So he's been making, resurgence back into society. And I mean, maybe that's because Point Pleasant has started the festival. They've, put it out there. They made John Keel's book, The Mothman Prophecies. They made it into a movie, and I mean, it's a big, pretty well-known movie. Maybe it's just because the media has put Mothman back on the map, and so, but the fact that they're all kind of happening in the same area, because there are, again, one-off sightings of the Mothman. And, going back to theories about what he is, I mean, if he's just a flying humanoid, there's plenty of those. I mean, we've had plenty of those sightings. There's people have pictures, they've got videos, they report it all the time, all over the world. So if that's a Mothman, then I guess he never really went away to begin with. So we'll see what happens with the Chicago sightings. I don't personally think he's a bad omen. I'm not expecting something horrible to happen in Chicago. But we'll see. We'll see. I'm excited. I don't know what'll happen first. I don't know if these sightings will kind of, teeter out a little bit, or if I'll be able to finish this documentary before it does. But I've got a couple theories. Initially when I started working on the Mothman documentary, I didn't believe in the Mothman. I just kind of thought it was a fun story, and I just went with the flow. Somebody else was actually working on the Mothman documentary, and I just thought, well, this is a good introduction for me into cryptozoology because it's always been something that I've been passionate about. But after really getting into it and doing the research, I see a lot of things that are connected, which tells me that this Mothman business is bigger than what it seems. I think that there's more to it. I think it's more than just the Mothman, personally. And that's kind of what I'm going to explore. And, I'd kind of like to, tell you guys a little bit more about, the town of Point Pleasant in general. And just that whole area. I mean, it's just so weird, so much happens. So many unfortunate events happen in this whole area. And then just weird things like the UFO sightings and, the different creatures that are kind of in the area that all seem related somehow. I mean, there's not a direct link between them yet. And that's kind of, I feel like the missing puzzle piece, and that's kind of what I aim to find, with the documentary. So, that's my goal, and I'd love to continue looking into John Keel's work, and kind of go on his path a little bit, because I think he was onto something. He died with this secret, which I guess is not really a secret because he was very out there about his stuff, but it really drove him crazy. because he could never seem to find the missing links in between the stories, but always knew that they all had some type of connection. And, once you start following a lead, then another one pops up on that lead, and then another one, and you almost kind of fall down into this endless pit of theories and stories that are all connected to each other. But like I said, somewhere in there is a missing piece, and I think we're close to finding it. I think that, if anybody's going to do it, it's going to be me. So we'll see. But anyway, guys, that's the Mothman. Let's go ahead and do our weekly tarot reading.
So we pulled the cards before we actually started recording. If you guys would like us to actually do that while we're recording, just let us know. But we've got the Queen of Swords, followed by Temperance, followed by the King of Swords. We also had the Ace of Cups on the bottom of the deck as well. So for me, this tells me that there needs to be some form of communication from a place of love. You might feel a little closed off with your emotions, but I feel like this is a great time to kind of master the way that you do communicate and the way that you do express yourself and your feelings, and possibly with your loved ones specifically. But it is a general reading, so it can always be vice versa. It doesn't actually have to be you, but you might have somebody that comes to you that is trying to work on their communication and trying to express themselves more appropriately. So just kind of walk lightheartedly and, take things as they come, and try to be as open-minded as you possibly can, and just work through whatever comes your way.
Okay, well, we'll see what that brings us with this week. I mean, let us know. If that resonates with you guys, please let us know. I think it'd be really cool to kind of put Ivy to the test and, see how good her skills are, which, I've personally seen firsthand. I can vouch for it, but I think I'm a little bit biased, so we'll see.
So let's go ahead and pick our topic for next week's episode.
So we literally, we have a jar, and we filled it up with different topics. We sat down and wrote about them and folded them up in little pieces of paper and put them in this jar. And we pull them, we'll pull it every week to kind of see, what direction we're going and what we're talking about. If you guys have any suggestions, we will absolutely add it to the jar. We'd love to talk about what you would like to hear about. So, just let us know. But let's go ahead and see what next week's topic is going to be. Let me get this open here. Oh, there's our little jar. Do you want to pull it?
Yeah. Mix them up.
Get them all stirred there.
Alright, I got one. And it's tarot. Imagine that.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Okay, well, like I said, so Ivy does tarot readings, and she's really good at it.
You can find me on Instagram at Seek and See Tarot. I am working towards forming a schedule to post, full moon readings, new moon readings, but also try to do weekly tarot scopes as well. So you never know what you might find.
So, yeah, definitely get on there and, check her out. That's what she does. In the meantime, we'll both kind of get into, general topics about, tarot next week. If you guys have any specific questions, feel free to ask. You can ask either, through commenting directly to the podcast or through, one of the social media links. We will, we'll write your questions down. We'll make sure we get them answered. So, that's what we'll be doing, next week. And of course, we'll still have our weekly reading as well. I think that'd be, extra fitting. So,
and you can always feel free to contact us through our email as well, which is on Wednesdays, wetalkweird@gmail.com.
Correct. And then, in the meantime, you guys know I am also working on launching this YouTube channel. I will be having that up. I do have some scripts worked out. It's just getting to the filming and the editing. But, with the coronavirus, pandemic going on, I've got plenty of free time now. And then you guys will have plenty of free time to watch and listen. So, but I think that is going to do it for today.
We hope that you join us next week and for all of our other episodes as they come out. But we'll see you guys at the next one.
All right, guys. We'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.